All right, he's going to upset us, and I like that because we were just talking about the deep dive I did into the retirement. If we would have privatized it in 1990 and you're getting ready to retire 10 years from now, what kind of money you would have, which was sickening. And he said, Zach, so I got something better. All right, brother, tell me what's better.
Well, better in terms of the way we're getting built. So we did it. So we did that exercise that you did and said, okay, if we just put it in the S&P 500 over that same period of time, what are we looking at? But it gets worse. So back in the 60s, when the government raided the quote-unquote lockbox of Social Security, what they did simultaneously at that time is Social Security that moment quit being a self-funded vehicle, right?
Yeah.
So it became a general obligation of the federal government, okay? Now, there's another general obligation debt of the federal government that I bet everybody listening to us has owned at some point. It's a U.S. government bond, okay? So here's where it gets worse. Had they taken our Social Security payments and put them in U.S. government bonds over the last 40 years, the average Social Security distribution would be 2.5 times larger than it is currently.
Nice.
But our government decided to pay foreign investors over 2x the level of interest on their general obligation debts than they're giving taxpayers credit for in the Social Security system. So you didn't even need stock market. We didn't even have to privatize Social Security to increase it 2.5x. And I've had people go, yeah, but those bonds can go down. And I'm like, oh my gosh, dude. Both things are general obligation debts of the federal government. If you trust one, you have to trust the other just as much. So
it's maddening, but all of this is maddening because you were talking about a guy that you had to talk off the ledge because people are. That's the first thing Zach says to me. He goes, Are you upset about the fact that a billionaire has taken over our entire government and is destroying everything? Joking. And you're like, I had to talk somebody off the ledge the other day, literally, who thought they took $2 trillion away from what, Medicare or Social Security or something?
Yeah. Like so we got back in this back and forth about DOGE and he's taking out $2 trillion from Medicare. And I sat there and I go, hey buddy, did you ever watch that show that we all watched as kids? What was it? Conjunction Junction?
Yeah.
Right? When they play the song, how a bill becomes a law. Why don't you explain to me how some unelected billionaire walks in there and cuts $2 trillion? Oh, you can't because that's not the way the legislative process works, bud. And even Trump cannot just cut $2 trillion from Medicare. That is that is predetermined. I forget what the government's name for it is, but that type of spending can only be pulled off the books from legislation that is passed through both houses of Congress. This is just, I have never seen, if you would have told me at some point that a highly capable billionaire with virtually nothing to gain from it said he's going to give of his own time to audit our federal government and tell us where the waste is, you would think that would be as close to political utopia as you could get on our streets. So we'd all join hands and go, hey, finally there's something we can all agree on, right? Because as American citizens, we all have one thing in common. We've been getting the screws turned to us by the government regardless of which side of the aisle you're on, okay?
Yeah.
So why don't we all make sure that these people aren't bilking us and, does anybody think there's probably a lot of waste in the federal government, right? And yet because Trump's looking into it, it's chaos, pandemonium. He's ripping. It's a constitutional crisis, I'm hearing.
Every day. You know what? I said this talking to Zach Abraham, Chief Estimate Officer, Bulwark Capital. I said this yesterday. I've been saying this for a while. If this was, say, Warren Buffett, if this was a bunch of forensic, accountant nerds who were looking into this, would people feel different, especially on the left, because Elon is everything that is the central casting of the bad, horrible person. He's a billionaire. And he gets a lot from the government. He employs a lot of people. He pisses a lot of people off. I think part of it is the messenger they hate as much as the message.
Well, yeah, but these people are a moving target because I remember when we thought climate change was the ultimate threat to civilization on Earth as opposed to Donald Trump. Elon Musk was sanctified. He was a deity. He was saving us, right? Then he turns and says, hey, I don't think this government should be wasting a lot of our money. And oh, by the way, I also resent the BS lawsuits that they've thrown at us and all this kind of stuff. And what's, I was just having this conversation with somebody else. I go, listen, the fact that we have to say this means that we're talking to highly unintelligent people, right? But Donald Trump and Elon Musk, if you think they have any financial reason in doing this, you're an idiot.
Yeah.
Okay. This costs them time. It costs them public. Do you think Elon Musk wants to give anybody any incentive to not purchase one of his cars?
Oh no, and he's got plenty of it. No.
Yeah, it's all complete nonsense. And I mean, you've got these guys now who literally are, this is like a public service in the way that I think the forefathers designed it, when they put the system together, right? Like you want the guys who have been the most successful to come back and say, hey, let's help out, right?
It's funny because everybody talks about like, okay, just who do you want? Do you want the world's richest, most successful human being in the history? Or do you want some idiot who can't, figure out how to tie his shoes to run it because you think he's going to, it's better. Our founding fathers were all super successful.
Yeah. Well, and you brought up Warren Buffett. I'll say this. I think if Warren Buffett was playing the same role that Elon Musk is currently, the din and the outcry would be exactly the same.
Oh, you think
and
so?
The reason why? It's Trump. It's not, it doesn't matter. These are not rational, even fact-based, even sensible arguments, right? So we could change the central casting. It's not going to matter at all. Trump is evil and Orange Man bad, right? It's like Stockholm Syndrome too, right? These people just keep going back to the same people that just keep hammering them. Trump didn't come into office with a $1 million net worth and leave worth $100 million. Okay, no. All the idiots these people have voted in did that. You look at Trump. I don't think any president in the last 100 years has paid more of a cost, both legally and financially, to be president of the United States than Donald Trump. Doesn't mean he's a great guy. Doesn't mean he's a Boy Scout. But trying to allege that he's doing this for nefarious or I mean, if this is a scam, he's really bad at it. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, how much did that hit his personal net worth in the first 4 years?
Well, yeah, I mean, he lost a ton of money, and I mean, and not only that, but he tarnished a name that had been built for 4 or 5 decades. Where, yeah, if you go to some parts of the country, it's okay, but most people, they can't afford to stay at those places, and the places that it is beloved are places most Americans will never get to. Here, it's like it's for the most part. On the left side of the aisle, it's a super tarnished name. Yeah,
and the other thing, your listeners will probably laugh at me when I say this, but in some ways it's funny, but in other ways it's a little bit depressing because you're like, this system's even more cynical than I thought it was.
Yeah.
Meaning, it doesn't, like, we can parade the truth and the facts right out in front of people. I mean, to the point where they are undeniable. And it doesn't matter.
No.
Right? Those people that have sucked up that ridiculous elixir that is called woke and nonsense, they have gone in head first, and there is nothing, I'm convinced there's nothing you can do to, I don't know if you're keeping tabs on it, but we're watching a resurgence of the idiocy up here. One of our state representatives was recently quoted now remember, they're trying like heck right now to defend the bill that they passed last year. Now, this is no exaggeration. That bill allows the government, the state government of Washington, to come into your home, or not even come into your home, at school, allows them to take your child, that I believe as young as age 10 or 12, take your child, give them a state-sponsored sex change operation without getting your consent, without telling you where the child is being held pre-operation and post-op, and if you don't like it, they have the right to permanently remove the child from your home. Okay, that's a bill they passed last year in Washington. A state representative in favor of that bill came out 3 days ago and said, of course, in trying to justify his cause, he said, quote, unquote, if you are old enough to get pregnant, you are old enough to make all medical decisions about your body.
This is why they keep losing. They keep running at, I said today, they're a rudderless ship
Yeah.
that is going out into the middle of the ocean, and they've got the wind behind their back. They have no anchor, and they're paddling towards their death. And then they're like, you know what? We could go faster.
We got to
Right?
speed
We can't
this up.
steer, but we can go faster.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's and you know, you and I have joked around on this in the past, and I've said it jokingly, but there was obviously, you know, there's a layer of truth to every joke. The only look, if the liberal movement, if progressives had control over their emotions, we'd be in serious trouble.
Yeah, they don't.
No, and it's the saving grace, right? They're always going to overplay their hand. They're always going to eventually tell you who they are and what they're really about, right? Like, think about right now. It'd be a wonderful test to put out to a group of college kids. And I would like them to say, will you please write me a 3-page essay on the platform of the DNC right now?
They couldn't. I heard
the DNC couldn't write it.
Hakeem Jeffries was on with, what's his name? Jon Stewart. And he said, where's your project 2025? Where's your vision for the thing? And he goes, oh, we've got we got a great vision. And then he started talking about, it's some sort of Maya Angelou quote, like, you don't have to remember me. You don't have to remember what I've done. You just have to remember how I make you feel.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, we're not going to be encumbered by what has been, these kinds of things.
Yeah. That's no, that's not what the average person thinks. The average person's like, no, I want to know what you're going to do for me.
Yeah, it's the other thing that has become so glaringly apparent in this, and again, not a surprise, but we were talking in the office today, and I'm sure a lot of people on here can sympathize with this. There are these things that we learn as we grow and we become adults and we become mature. And you just sort of walk around assuming that everybody else is learning the same thing, right? You're like, yeah, this is part of the aging process. And then you hear some of these people open their mouth. And the thing that I think to myself all the time is, I almost want to give you a medal because I think it's remarkable you could get to the age of 55 or 60 and still be that stupid.
Yes.
Like, how did you avoid that much intelligence and knowledge? Right? It's like almost an achievement. Like, did you eat Cheetos and watch The Simpsons your entire life up to this point?
How are you not dead?
Right. How have you not been hit by a car? How have you not swallowed a knife on accident?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it really is remarkable, and it's like having these arguments. This is a grown man worried that a guy can just walk into the Oval Office and unilaterally pull $2 trillion from a budget. Then you turn on the news and you hear people with master's degrees asserting the same thing, and you're going, you're either a liar or you're a complete idiot. Like,
it's a person who knows that it's not true and then lies to you anyways because they're not quite sure it's not true.
Right.
Because they don't really know the rules. Like yesterday, I did an interview here. A lovely lady named Afton Bain. She's like 38. She's a progressive. She comes in because she's doing pot for potholes because we have so many potholes throughout Tennessee. So it was cool, but she's super progressive. Like she wants big. She says, I want bigger government. I want blah, 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 blah. And then when I'd hit her with stuff, she's like, I didn't know that. Like she wanted to we need more property taxes, this, that, and the other. And she goes, California's done it wrong. And I said, and then I explained to her why Prop 13 is the number one thing, the only thing everybody in California agrees on. If you touch Prop 13, you're done. I don't care how progressive you are. They will throw you. Every Democrat will throw you out. Then I explained to her, my mother's house, she'd have to pay $24,000 extra a year on property taxes, as opposed to the $2,000 she pays now. She couldn't afford to live there. Nobody could afford to live in any of their places anymore.
No. And the irony is if you go to these places that are considered these liberal bastions, all of their causes do the worst there.
Yep.
Right? Like, meaning, assuming I'm not a drug addict, right? Because if I'm a drug addict and I'm in Seattle and San Francisco, they'll basically give me drugs, right? Yeah. So
you're going to get an award.
Yeah, right. So assuming I'm not a drug addict, I'd much rather be a person that's struggling or down on my luck in Nashville than I would San Francisco.
Of course.
Right? There's people there that and then it's that whole dystopian. You know what they are? They're like the bugs. Remember the movie Starship Troopers? Remember?
Yeah. Oh God, yeah.
Yeah, the bugs take over a planet, suck all. That's sort of what these progressives do. They move into a city, they absolutely ruin it, and then they look at you and go, "Here's our proof case. We want to take this national, baby."
Exactly.
And you're going, "No, don't California my Washington, or don't California my Texas, or what."
Don't California anything, and it's just horrible. What's you look at the stock market? We should probably talk a little bit about this. Talking to Zach Abraham, Chief Investment Officer, Bulwark Capital. Look at the market. I think it's overbought. The tariffs, I think, worry a lot of people. He said today, look, we're going to feel some pain. You feel like, we're already getting told there's not going to be another rate cut till probably September at the earliest. Are you feeling like we've got a little bit of a slowdown ahead of us?
So I'm going to do something that they always tell people that do what I do never to do, right? Which is make some concrete calls. Okay, so I will just say this right now. Listen, none of this is financial advice for people because I don't know what you're doing and I don't know what your needs are and all that other kind of stuff. But I will say this: I don't think I have never seen a period of time in my career, and I include that in 0809, where I see more retail investors getting taken down a road that is going to cause them massive amounts of pain, and the vast majority of them. Here's the most pernicious part. The vast majority of them think that they are avoiding the crazy and they don't realize that they're at ground zero. And the reason they don't think, the reason they're a lot of these retired folks, they're not out there buying, try to Palantir at 70 times revenue. They're not out there buying AppLovin at 40 times revenue. They're buying stalwarts like Apple and Costco. Okay, the problem is unlike any other asset bubble we've had, it's created really weird scenarios where Costco is now a few ticks away from trading at 70 times earnings. It is at 58 times forward earnings, the highest valuation it's ever had, including back in the days when it was growing revenue at 40% a year. Okay, now let me remind you that this is a company that's growing at 7% a year. Okay, and so And these anomalies have been created by passive investing. For the first time in the history of our country, more than 50 cents of every dollar is invested via index funds. So what that means is more than half the stocks in the market that trade every single day are being traded on a completely non-financial basis. People go, Zach, what do you mean? When you buy an index fund, you are buying the most of the biggest company in that index, and you are buying the least of that company in that index, okay? When more than 50% of investment dollars are going toward a vehicle like that, what you would expect to see over time is a market that extremely overvalues large companies and extraordinarily undervalues small ones. Because what determines how much of that, every time somebody puts $1 into the S&P 500, what determines how much of that money each company gets is not their profitability, not their margins, not their price to earnings ratio, not their dividends. It's just their size, right? So why is Costco doing what it's doing? We think I think the biggest reason, and I think it's impossible to come up with a logical explanation unless you look at this, they're doing it because Costco is in the top 20 on the NASDAQ. So every time somebody's buying triple Q, they're buying Costco. Costco also happens to be really popular amongst value investors, buy and hold investors. Why? Because Buffett and Munger held it for so many years. So it's getting hit on both fronts. But now you're sitting there looking at a situation like Costco, which I love. I love everything about that company. Their politics are a little too left to me, but I give them a pass on that because of how well they treat their employees, right? Yeah. If every company treated their employees like Costco does, we would have significantly less problems in this country. But never, and none of this is their fault. But so then you flip around and you start looking at other things that are outside of these indexes. I've said it. I have never seen valuation spreads like this where you can go out literally and buy companies that trade in not sketchy parts of the world. I'm talking Korea and Singapore and Panama and all what are considered stable locales, And as long as those companies aren't U.S. based, you can find companies that are growing twice as fast in the same sector that are trading at 1/5 and 1/6 the valuation.
Man,
I've never seen value opportunities like this, man. We're buying companies that are growing at 20%, paying out 7 and 8% dividends, right? The reason they're paying out so many big dividends is because they've already bought back so much stock they can't buy anymore, right? They're cash flowing like crazy and they're trading at 6 times earnings.
It's because people are buying sexy. They're buying name. You know, they want Nike. They're not happy with Skechers. They want Nike. Right? It's got to be, and it's going to hurt their feet eventually. And the Skechers feel comfortable, and the Nikes are a great shoe, but they're not a great shoe at that. You wanted those 4s, and you're a size 8. All they had was a 7.5, and you squished yourself in there, and that's the nightmare they have.
Yep.
It's interesting. People want to reach out to you because they'd be foolish not to, especially this time of year with stuff that's a little, you guys are going to show everybody what's for as far as what you can do for them. How do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, easiest way, go to bulwarkcapitalmanagement.com, knowyourriskradio.com. You can subscribe to the podcast. We do a 30-minute update every single day about what's new in finance and politics. Not hard to find. And like I said, anytime you say the kind of stuff that I'm saying, it's like, oh, yeah, he's pitching his book. I get it. And in a way I am, because that's the stuff we're investing in. I'm just telling you, like, not only do I think there are things out there that are going to hurt people, but good. I've done this almost 20 years. I've never seen valuations like this. You're looking at these companies and you're going, okay, what's wrong with it? The only reason it's got a 12% dividend. That means the dividend's about ready to get cut. This thing's in trouble. You go look underneath and you're like, no, this thing's cash flowing more than it ever has before. They're paying a 12% dividend because everybody sold the stock. I've just never seen anything like it. So the opportunities are out there. They're incredible. It's just not in the stuff you're hearing people talk about.
You're the man. I love talking to you. Zach Abraham, Chief Investment Officer, Bulwark Capital. We'll do it again next week.
All right, brother. Thank you for having me.
Investment advisory services offered through Trek Financial LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. The opinions expressed in this program are for general informational purposes only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual or on any specific security. Any references to performance of securities are thought to be materially accurate, and actual performance may differ. Investments involve risk and are not guaranteed. Past performance doesn't guarantee future results. Trek 24308.